And it begins with an article that I found. It was written in 1990. And the date was August 13th. And the headline of this article really caught my attention. The title reads, "Entombed in a cave for 5 days. A father and his 2 young sons are rescued on the verge of death." Listen to the first few lines of this article as it reads. Gary Lutz had recalled the words of the 23rd Psalm more than once in his life. The 37-year-old Tampa land surveyor had called on God when his wife Linda died of breast cancer just 4.5 years before. Now he was beseeching him again, begging to be delivered from the darkness that had enclosed in around him and his 2 young sons. Trapped for 5 days in the chilly depths of West Virginia's New Trout Cave. Tormented by hunger, by thirst, they had finally lain down on the cave floor together. Yes, he says, we lay down to die. We were just so tired and so exhausted. We felt like we'd fought as long as we could, and we were ready to just rest. Gary Lutz was a 20-year caving expert. He was a veteran of caves. He has been caving at this particular site several times before, and all he wanted to do is go on a family trip with his 2 sons who have never been caving before. So he took Gary Lutz Jr., who was 13 years old, and his other boy, Tim, who was 9 years old. They decided to check out the caves of New Trout in West Virginia. It's a limestone cave, and it sits about 200 feet below the surface of a big dome, rock shape, and it's about several thousand feet long. They entered into the cave with high expectations, and within 45 minutes, about 1,000 feet deep into this cave, they reach what cavers call the Grand Hall, or the big room. It's the biggest opening or the biggest room inside of a cave. And in this particular cave, the ceilings were about 50 feet high. Their flashlight could just barely reach the top of the cave where the stalactites and on the bottom the stalagmites, we learned that this week, were growing. Soon after that amazing experience, just beautiful with the waterfall cascading down the one side, they shimmy their way through a labyrinth of mazes all the way until they reach a point where there's an 8-foot drop where they have to tie off with a rope and lower themselves down the rock face to get to the next part of their journey. And it was there where Gary Lutz broke the cardinal rule of caving. You see, he had a backpack on that was getting caught all the time on the rocks as he was shimmying by, and he thought, you know what, I'm just going to leave my backpack here, and we're going to continue going. The backpack that he had on his back had their life support system. It had extra water, it had food, it had extra kerosene for their lanterns because they were using kerosene on this particular trip. And he said, I'm going to leave it here because you know what? We have more than enough time to come back. We only want to be gone 45 minutes, and we have hours worth of kerosene in these special lanterns that they were using. 10 minutes later, another 200 feet deep into that cave, the unimaginable began to happen. As one by one, their lights began to flicker and soon fade. And now the father, Gary Lutz, is stuck in a very hard decision. He has to make one right now. Do I take the remaining lantern and go and get the bag? Or do I stay here with my sons? What would you do? He runs the risk of his lantern burning out halfway to the bag. And then he's stuck somewhere between the bag and his sons. And he might never see both again. a miscalculation, one bad decision left the boys and their dad, because the dad did not go back for the bag, he remained with his boys. This bad decision left them stranded for 5 days with no food, with no water, at the bottom of a pitch black cave. And if you've ever been inside of a cave, can you imagine going through one with no light? Temperatures reaching around the single digits. It's wet, it's cold, and all they heard for 5 days were the screeching of bats high above them. In the end, they were dehydrated. The article says they were starting to hallucinate. One of the boys started hallucinating that there was this imaginary pop machine in front of him, and he was convinced that he could take a Coke bottle out of the machine without using quarters. The father was also experiencing some hallucinations. He was starting to imagine that he was at home, and he was reclining in his lazy boy in front of his TV, but he was angry because he couldn't figure out why the remote wasn't working. The hallucinations were starting to kick in. The other boy started to breathe irregularly, all early signs. They just laid down and were just ready to accept their fate. But then, on day 5, they started to hear voices. They started to hear a voice. They said in the article it sounded like angels coming off from the distance. They could hear their rescuer coming to get them out. Somebody was taking a walk, takes a walk every once in a while, and took a walk on day 1, took a walk on day 3, and noticed there was the same truck parked outside of a cave, and they thought something must be wrong. They ran the plates. They found out that they were on a caving expedition, and a 500-man search party went out looking for them, until finally on day 5, they found them. This week, during VBS, the kids learned that life is much like a walk through a cave. Sometimes you turn the corner and you bask in the beauty of a moment in your life, like the grand hall. You fall in love, you have children, you get married, you get that beautiful job, you get that sports car, whatever it is for you, you have this beautiful moment in your life, and then just like that, you have no idea how you got so deep and so dark and so lonely so fast. That one mistake that we made many years ago has trapped us in this cave in a pit called sin. And Satan would be absolutely content if we just start to scamper and lose our hope in this labyrinth of despair. And were it not for Jesus, we would never even have the possibility to see the light of another day again. They learned that Jesus is the light of the world. And it was because of his sacrifice that you and I are now in the middle of the greatest rescue operation this universe has ever witnessed. Our lives are full of adventure, and along the way we can see glimpses and we can hear the voice of Jesus, our Savior, our rescuer, coming to rescue us. He's giving us glimpses of hope, of courage, of direction, of love, and of power. These were the 5 Bible points we learned each day. Every one of us in this room has our own story. At this time, I want to call up my 4 buddies from the Caving Institute. They helped me with my skits at the beginning of our time together to illustrate the Bible point of the day. I want to call them up. And I've asked each of them to share just a little bit of a... As you can tell, we had a lot of fun during our time together. I've asked them to share their name, what their Bible point was for that day, and just a short 2 to 3 minute experience to illustrate how Jesus showed up on their journeys.
Well, on Monday, I arrived as Clark Cavan, a young man who dreamed of being a professional caver ever since he was a little lad. The only problem was, he was terrible at it. He could not do it no matter how he tried. He stumbled, he fell. He was directionally challenged, couldn't find his way. And he felt it was useless and hopeless to go on. But then, Clark bumped into Pastor Z and all the kids from VBS, and he discovered that Jesus gives us hope. Do you know, it reminded me of a story. When I was very young, about the same age as the kids in VBS, my grandma, for my birthday once, gave me a fine set of Parker pens. Does anyone know what they are? They were silver pens. 2 of them, a fountain pen and a propelling pencil. And they came in a fine velvet box. And I cherished those pens. They were from my grandma. And I thought, no more Bic pens for me. I'm going to be using these fine pens at school. And for about 2 or 3 days, I enjoyed doing my studies and writing and learning at school with my fine pen. But you can imagine my horror when one day I opened up my velvet box and only 1 pen was inside. I couldn't understand it. What happened to my other pen? I was so disappointed. I've only had them 4 days. They're from my grandma. I know what I'll do. I'll backtrack and go into every classroom I was just in and see whether it's there. But I had this awful feeling that someone else was going to find my pen and keep it for themselves. And so I went back to the math class. Nothing there. I went back to the chemistry class. Nothing there. And finally, I wound up in the history class. And I searched on the ground. I looked in tables, under chairs. Nothing. And then I thought to myself, do you know, I never pray, but there's something I want to pray about right now. I said, dear Jesus, I cannot find my pen. I don't know why it was important for me, but I prayed, dear Jesus, will you help me find my pen? The funny thing is, that very moment, in a voice as clear as if you spoke to me, a voice said, Andrew, look under the baseboards. Baseboards, I wasn't even anywhere near there. I went down, I looked under there. It is dark, it is dusty, it's covered in cobwebs and chewing gum and spiders. And there, laying in the darkness, was my Parker pen. And I never forgot that. I thought, do you mean to tell me there is a Lord, a Jesus in heaven, that will even watch over my Parker pen? And it reminded me of the text in Philippians 4, verse 6 that says this, be anxious for nothing, but by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. Well, on Wednesday, I came back as Clark Cavan one more time, and Clark was really having a trouble finding his way. And he'd read about bats and the fact that bats have the capability of echolocation. And so he'd blindfolded himself, and he was stumbling around making dog noises and chicken noises, hoping that the sound would bounce back off the walls and help him on his way. But he was in a terrible mess, and of course he was lost. But luckily he bumped into Pastor Z and the kids from VBS, and they told him that Jesus gives us direction. And that reminded me of a second story. On November the 7th, 1989, I was traveling on my way to Gatwick Airport with the rest of my family to leave them and come and fly and live here in this country called Canada. I was in England, and my parents were taking me to the airport. It was a very somber mood. We were all trying to be cheerful, but we realized we were separating from one another. And it was very early in the morning. It was very dark. And my dad had said to me, do you want to drive the car for the last time? And it was dark, and it was raining in England, as it sometimes does. And we were making our way towards the airport. And we were stuck on a single-lane highway behind an articulated lorry or a semi-truck. It was 32 feet long. It was throwing up spray. And we have 2 speeds on our windscreen wipers. There's regular, and then there's fast. We were going on the fast, and I couldn't see. The spray was so distracting. And so what I thought was a lonely stretch of road, I decided to overtake the truck. And so I really put my foot down. We pulled out, and we were making our way gradually along the length of the truck. They're really long when you're trying to overtake them. And just when I thought all was going well, immediately in front of me, over the brow of a hill, came a car, its headlights full on. It looked like it was going to be a head-on collision. I jammed on the brakes in the slithering wet weather, and I don't know what happened, but our car suddenly ground to an immediate halt and tucked in behind the truck, and this other car shot by. It is a maneuver I know I am not capable of, so please don't ever accept a lift from me on the way home. But I never forgot that, because I felt that that car was placed behind that truck again by invisible hands. If that had not gone well, I would not have had my experience here in Canada. I wouldn't have had to have been a part of VBS. I wouldn't have enjoyed my time and learned that Jesus gives us direction. And so I want you boys and girls to know that Jesus gives us hope and Jesus gives us direction in our lives.
All right. I want to thank you, Pastor X, for having us all back here again today. That was very kind of you. And we're especially privileged to be with Clark Cavern, because he is the valedictorian of our class at the Caving Institute. I mean, the bar isn't very high, mind you, but he was still the valedictorian. You know how we know he's the valedictorian? Do you know how we know? You know how we can tell? Anybody know? It's because of the hat. The hat. Look, he has the official caving hat, and they give that to the valedictorian. The rest of us were just left to figure out on our own, but he got the hat as a valedictorian. So we're very glad to be a part of your graduating class there, Mr. Clark. So my name is Dark Deep. Dark Deep. And I'm just going to say, Pastor W, I just need to bring this out. You know, I understand that all week you were calling me Deep Dark.
Yes.
That's not my name.
Okay.
And I think you should be careful with that. I think it's very important that you get people's names right. I think you can hurt people's feelings, Pastor X, if you get the name wrong. You know what I mean? So I just hope that you'll pick that up. So I had the opportunity to be here on Tuesday as Dark Deep, and I was very excited about going into the caves because I had brought every flashlight imaginable that I could find, and I was all ready to go into the caves. But the truth is, I'm afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of the dark. And I didn't know what to do. But I was so good. I came here and I found out from the VBS kids and from Pastor W that Jesus gives us courage. Yeah, he gives us courage. And so Pastor Q asked us to think of a time when we could, we had to do something that related to what our character was. So I had to think of a time when I needed courage. And God gives us courage sometimes when we're doing something really important, like witnessing for him. He sometimes gives us courage when we're doing something that's just ridiculous. And I was thinking of a time I needed courage for when I was doing something ridiculous. If you were here last week, I showed you a picture of the high ropes course at Camp White Sand in Saskatchewan. And I remember when they built that course, 40 feet up in the air, professionally built, all very nice high ropes course. And at one end of that high ropes course, they built a zip line. And so that first year that we had the high ropes course, everybody was going on the zip line, and everybody was saying, "Oh, Pastor Godso, it's so much fun. Have you tried the zip line?" "No, I haven't gone on the zip line." "Oh, Pastor Godso, you need to go on the zip line." I was like, "Yes, well, I'm not going to go on the zip line." "No, really, you need to go on the zip line." And actually, I wanted to go on the zip line because I saw everybody having so much fun, but I'm afraid of heights. And I learned in junior Sabbath school this morning, like Gabriel, my friend, also is afraid of heights, right? There's some of us that are afraid of heights. I'm afraid of heights. But I thought, I knew about all the safety testing and everything, so I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go on the zip line. So I got the harness on, and you have to climb up like the big pole, like one of those telephone pole guys. And I thought, how bad can this be? I mean, everybody else is doing it. Little kids are doing it. My wife is doing it. And I only got like 5 or 6 steps up that pole, and I started to shake and sweat and tremble. I was so scared. I needed courage. And at that point, I could have just said, you know what, this is ridiculous. If God wanted us to fly, he would have given us wings. We were supposed to be on the ground. I'm just going to go back down. But your male ego kicks in, and you're like, I really wanted to do it, so I kept climbing higher and higher and higher up to that little platform that's, I think it was 35 feet off the ground, which is way too high in the air. And I got up there, and what would be nice is if you got up there, if you had somebody supportive, somebody encouraging, not Darwin Kapkara. So I get up there. If anybody knows Darwin Kapkara, you can appreciate what I'm facing here. I got up there, and, they have to take off the clip from the harness you're on, connect it to the ground, and clip you in up there. Then they have to clip you to the zip line. And Darwin is up there, going like, whoops, I don't know what to do now. And I wonder if this rope is going to hold you. And these poles aren't very strong, and I hope the wind doesn't blow you off. And all kinds of terrible, nasty things instead of being encouraging to me. So I really needed courage, and I was praying. I had a deeply spiritual experience, praying the whole way up there, saying, Lord, I don't know why I'm doing this, but if you know how you pray, if you'll get me out of this, I'm going to stay on the ground where I belong from now on. And so you get up there, and then they make you sit on the little ledge, and then they say, just scoot off the edge of the ledge. That doesn't sound very hard, but my brain is looking down and saying, there's no way I'm going to do that, because that's just stupid. Why would I do that? Fly off into midair like that. And Darwin is taunting me and harassing me. And so I prayed to Jesus. I really did. I really did. I would still be sitting there, and they'd be throwing up food for me and building me a hut or something. But I had to pray to Jesus and say, please give me the courage just this once to go on this zip line and come off of this ledge. And he did. He did. And I survived. And it was fun. Once. It was fun once. I'm not going to do it again, but it was fun. So I thank Jesus for giving us courage when we need it, even for stuff that isn't super important. And I'm reminded of the verse that I shared with you last week, and that's 2 Timothy 1, verse 7, that says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. And I'm thankful that Jesus gives us courage.
Follow him.
All right.
Hi, my name is Rocky Rob, the cave explorer, and I had such a good time at VBS, but it was awful as well, because on my Thursday at VBS, I stepped on a rock, I slipped, I fell, and I hurt myself. I lost my helmet and my backpack. I don't even know where it was. It was just somewhere in the cave, and I had to be rescued by these three guys. They had to come and get me. It was so scary. But I learned through their rescue that Jesus gives us love.
Follow him.
There was a time in my life when I worked the afternoon shift in my plant, and one evening in winter, icy roads, 2 o'clock in the morning, I was on my way home, and I had to pass through this little village called Churchill, of all places. And as I'm going through Churchill, there's one church in Churchill. You'd imagine that if you're in a car and you break down, or if something happens, Churchill would be the phenomenal place to do so, Churchill. So I'm traveling in my car, it's icy outside, and I look up ahead of me, and I see Bambi. I see Bambi hopping, skipping, and crossing the road. And I'm thinking to myself, well, there isn't a lot of room between Bambi and I. Should I just step on the gas, vroom, and keep going? Or should I step on the brake? Which one should I choose? Brake. It might have been better to step on the gas, but I did choose to step on the brake. And when I stepped on the brake, my car spun like 3 times. I just lost count of how many times my car was spinning. It went off into the ditch and into a big bank of snow, and there was like a poof. Just this big white cloud of snow. And when it all settled, I was at least up to my hood in snow. So I got out being the big guy that I am, and I said, you know what, I think I can push it out of here. And I tried, and I tried, but it was impossible. So I said, well, it's only about 15 kilometers from here to my home, so I'll walk. Put on my coat, and I started walking towards my house, along Highway 11, through Churchill, all the way up to Barrie. And I was thinking, this is going to take a while. And as I'm driving, a car starts to approach from behind me. And I'm big and tall and I'm mean looking, but I was scared. Because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And this car started to slow down, and I'm thinking, oh no, I've heard stories like this on the news. I'm going to be abducted. So I thought, well, maybe I should walk a little faster. So I started walking. And the car started to slow down, and eventually the car did come to a stop. And I was like, oh man, what's going on here? And the window rolled down, and out popped the head of this lady that I knew. 2 o'clock in the morning, she was also on her way home from work. And she said to me, Robert, that car back there in the ditch, is that yours? And the answer was yes. And you know, she picked me up and she drove me home, was able to call the tow truck, go back and get my car. It feels wonderful to be rescued, and it feels wonderful to be loved. And that reminds me of a passage which is found in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, which says, cast all your cares on him. Because I was really worried that night about how things would go. But cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. I had a fantastic week at VBS. Jesus gives us love. All right.
And then I showed up on Friday morning. And the kids were already in their VBS mode, and I was excited. I, along with my fellow cavers from the Cave Institute, had gone through a course, and we had been trained how to cave. And as you saw as we came up here, we're very adept. We move smoothly. Through the training, we learned to do it better. And I had received my letter that says I was going to graduate. And the graduation was going to come, and I was overjoyed. I was sharing it with all the kids. And then Pastor Zama said, can I see the letter that you're holding? And the letter, he started to read it, and I told the kids how proud I was of myself for my success. And he said, have you read the letter? I said, well, it's a little boring. It's a bit long. I read half of it, yes. And he says, well, it says here that you're going to have to lead a group through a cave. Now, that didn't sit well with me and doesn't sit well with me, but I was able to do it because I learned through that discussion with Pastor Z and with the kids that Jesus gives us power. And I was given the power because I'm very afraid of leading groups or being in charge of anything. It makes me faint. And that's not really good if you're going to be walking in the dark down in a cave and you faint on a group that you're leading. But I found the power through that. And that reminded me of a story where we are given the power to do things and to stand up against things that are wrong that we see in the world. When I was about 12 or 13, like every 12 or 13-year-old, likes to be included in the group that they're in. And you don't want to do anything that would be strange from what your group is thinking and doing. And we were actually at Ferndale Camp, Keswick Camp. I don't know if any of you know that place where the church used to have a camp up on Lake Rosso, and they used to have camp meetings there. It was a very lovely place. We don't have it anymore. It's opposite of where Camp Frenda is. But anyhow, there was a group of my peers, and there was another kid about the same age as us, but he wasn't in the group. And he had chosen to wear some boots that were very unique in style for that time of society. They were a he was a boy, and they were a patent white boot with a heel, and it looked very strange. And so the group that I was with, they started to tease him about that. And they teased him very, very hard. And he started to cry. And that wasn't really good. But at that point, I thought, that's not nice. That's not really nice. But as being a part of the group, you don't want to speak out against what your group is doing. You want to be part of the group. But I said, Jesus, give me the power to respond, to stand up for this guy. And I got the power. Jesus gave me the power. I spoke out. I said, listen, guys, this is not right. Stop it. And they listened to me and they stopped it. So, and it reminds me of a text in the Bible, Acts chapter 1, verse 7 and 8, where Jesus is returning to heaven. And I don't know if the adults remember this. The children might remember it from our day on Friday. But what does he say to his disciples? I'm going away. I don't have it word for word here. You're going to have to work with me. I'm going back, but I'm going to give you power through the Holy Spirit to do what? To be my disciples, to be my witnesses, to share the message in Judea and Samaria and Toronto and Markham. And you and I, we have that power because Jesus gives us power.
You just put it in. Thank you very much, guys. You can have a seat. I just want to close. Give them a round of applause. Why not? They deserve it. They did a wonderful job with me this week. Friends, I just want to close by saying that we are all on a journey through a cave called life. And to me, the best thing I can think of to have in a cave is light. And what Jesus said 2,000 years ago is still an invitation for you and for me today. He says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. May you choose to follow him today. May you choose to allow his grace to save you, to rescue you one day from this world. And may we be able to sing the song of our theme song. The first line says, Jesus is the one who lights our way. He gives us hope for each new day. When the world feels dark and lonely, his love illuminates. He is the one I trust, and I will follow him.